Well, good morning, Lance Ford, coming to us all the way from Florida, the inlands.
Yeah, it's like a giant litter box here, man.
Yep. Taylor and I are, it's 10 a.m. It's 11 a.m. your time, and you were just smoking a pipe. Is that a normal morning routine
I
for
think
you?
it's 10 a.m. your time, isn't it?
It is 10 a.m. my time. I'm in a little sliver of
Is it really,
there's one little sliver here in Florida
really?
that's central
You're
time.
central
Yeah.
time zone.
I
You're
didn't even know it.
Midwestern.
I didn't even know it till I moved here. I'm like, what the heck? I thought it was gonna be an Eastern, but there's a
No
little
idea.
sliver here. But
But
yes, to answer your question, usually my morning routine with Jesus has my little morning blend of pipe,
hmm,
little pipe, little holy smoke there, and then we start the cigars in the
holy smoke.
afternoon.
Do you drink coffee in the morning?
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
What do
yeah.
you eat? What do you pair with your cigar and your coffee?
Either a little granola or like this morning, I made a little omelet and then I threw some corn tortillas in the skillet, warmed those corn tortillas up. A little Texas type breakfast.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
I told Cheryl we were meeting and we were talking about you, Lance, and
Uh
we agreed you're a cross between Tim McGraw and Phil Collins. What do you think?
oh. So where do those blend? Tell me how those
Just you
blend
got,
in.
I don't know. I always thought you looked like Tim McGraw, and then today I thought a little more Phil Collinsy. Was
Well, that's
the
the
eyebrow was
baldness. I'll take the
Two of
shut
my
up
favorite
about
artists, by the
I,
way.
I I'll take the Tim McGraw deal, especially his
yeah, he's
six pack.
tight. That dude's
Yeah,
sick.
no,
Yeah,
that
he's
dude.
tight.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Well, we are we're excited to have you. You just had a book come out, Atlas Factor.
Yes, sir.
And how you feeling about that so far?
What? Which part?
Well, are people calling you out? If for people that don't know Lance Ford has been a very good friend of mine for a long, long time, and a seminal voice in the missional movement, but mostly on the prophetic side. A lot of people would say Lance Ford is kind of this pesky little dude that keeps telling us that we should be servants and not leaders. Like you've been writing, you wrote Unleader, which is about as straightforward a title as you can get, which was a great book. Atlas
Thank you.
Factor,
Thank you.
still in that same, like it seems like this has been your almost like your life's work to talk about the
Yeah,
dilemma of leadership, and like would that be accurate?
Well,
yeah. I think
even the starfish is right
Yeah,
in that
there you go.
stream as well.
Yeah.
yeah. What happened with me was, and Hugh, like you said. In fact, um, not to get romantic with you here, you may have to leave the room, Taylor, because I'm gonna get a little romantic with
I'm
Hugh
already
here.
feeling like I might should step
Yeah,
out.
I'm
Oh,
sorry. You ought to just get out of the space here. But no,
so
I remember the first time I met you, Hugh. And actually, you talk about a pretty seminal day. It would have been 2006. You and Matt Smay were hosting a little consortium at Fuller, and you had Michael Frost and Alan Hirsch there. Now, I had been corresponding for a couple of years with Alan, um, but had never been face to face with him. But it was there that over those few days that I met all you guys at the same time.
yep.
And little did I know that you and Frosty and Alan were going to become some of my dearest friends and definitely influencers. So the missional stuff, I threw in the fray uh, back then, a little bit before then. But then when my writing started, I wrote several books. Brad Briscoe and I, in
Yep.
particular, everybody used to call us Brants,
Yep.
and so we did a lot together in the missional stuff, a lot, neighboring stuff, the practices, where you live, work, play, yada yada yada. But in 2010, I did Unleader, and so the leadership stuff had really been on my heart, and I just didn't feel like hardly anybody was. I'm not saying I was a voice crying in the wilderness, but there were just a few that were really speaking into it,
Yeah.
that were saying much, and so uh, but I was kind of like looked at side-eyed by what I was saying. But as far as the more of the missional stuff, I felt like over the last 5 years, the Lord really spoke to me and said, "Hey, look, I mean, I turned 60 in April, so it's like, hey, there's not a lot of sand in the hourglass left, and there's a
Well
lot of
said.
great, yeah, there's a lot of great people that are riding on missional stuff per se, and I just feel like the Lord said, hey, I quit. That's not what I want you to do from this point. I want you to give what you got left to the leadership stuff. So that's why I'm, really on about that.
Awesome. Hey, it's gonna be a little bit of an awkward thing, but we're down in the basement of Post Commons, and for whatever reason, it feels like people are flushing the toilet like every.
I don't hear it.
You
I
won't.
don't
They
think
won't pick up.
And we have it looks like a children's church choir coming down the stairs right now. So you and Taylor get acquainted for a second. I'm just gonna go kick some butt.
He's gonna put "Do not flush" signs on the.
But that may be symbiotic. I mean, that may be a sign of what we're going to talk about. Who knows? I don't know
No, it
where
is.
we're
I
going.
mean, it's what we want to talk about. We want to kind of navigate all of the leadership stuff. We actually, for the past month, Lance, have been saying that we want you and probably Fitch back on to talk power dynamics.
Mm.
We have some good friends in inner city Pittsburgh, Aliquippa, Pittsburgh, that have been doing life together for 50, 60 years. They
Mm.
were a part of the Jesus movement, and they started a little Benedictine community in Aliquippa, and we want to have this kind of series of what does leadership look like, but we feel like starting with you would be the best move, because we want some tension in here, and we want to recognize leadership while also understanding, like our book comes out today, right? So
Yes,
we
and
and
it's a
this
dang good book too.
well,
Yeah,
this
Stop patronizing me.
we're averaging 5 stars right now. It's one review on there.
this podcast will come out later, so it won't be the day that the book comes out, but we're pretty convinced that to kind of accurately manifest the leadership dreams that we all seem to share, it starts with the foundation of the faith community that you're building. So I was telling Hugh before we started this morning, and then take all this information and let's go at it. But I was a part of two really amazing communities prior to 2010, where we had every intention of creating, ideas like plurality of leadership or servant leadership. But because of the foundation that we laid of the type of community that we had, more of an organizational, top-down model, it didn't matter what we said. We could word it and phrase it any way that we wanted, but what ended up growing out of that foundation was the same type of leadership structure again. And then last thing is, we want to talk about how natural energy and natural gravitas among certain types of leaders is not necessarily a bad thing, but how do we kind of place those gifts and those skills and those callings, the apostolic, the prophetic, all that stuff. So that's what we've been talking about a lot, and we just said, man, we got to get Lance in here and just dive in.
Nope.
I think you're muted, bro.
Unmute yourself, brother man. No.
All right. This is how we do things.
Yeah. We'll figure it out.
Stand by.
We'll figure it out. Gotta be Lance, all right. Yeah.
We're good.
But Lance ain't good. So you can hear us.
Oh, there you go. You're back on, Lance.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Well, what was
That's
that?
weird.
What type of UFO situations going on?
I have no idea, but does
Hey,
it sound right now?
you're good. So we'll just pick back up. So that's why we brought you on. That's why we wanted to talk about these things. And
Sure.
I think we want to just go as deep as we can into all the leadership stuff
Let's
within the faith
let's dive
community.
into it. Yeah, love to.
What do you think? First big question that we should just go at. And by the way, we can argue. We know we're pretty much on the same side, but
Yeah.
um, can we go at this energy thing first of all? Because it seems like that's like even for, I mean, we did a network of missional communities, but I was still like the guy that started it, and so there was like a, some people called it the Hugh Halter factor, which always felt really awkward to me.
Yeah.
Um, here as the initiator of this mission here, the perception from people on the outside is a lot of people think I even own all this. So they think I'm the owner, even though that's not how we set it up. But, when we're in a room, there's an energy that it's like you try to manage your energy.
Right.
You try to get out of the way to build people up, but there still are still issues, when
Sure.
there's slander or people are upset, they always still try to find what they think is the head.
Right.
Do you think that's like when we talk about apes, the apostolic, do you think the gravitas or the energy factor is an issue of the apostolic or not?
Yeah, it's charisma, and it's a double-edged sword, and Paul had to deal with this, right? He talked about it. Some of you say I'm a
Yeah.
follower of Paul. Some of you say I'm a follower of Apollos or Peter, Cephas. And so this is nothing new. It's been age old, and so you have to actively think through as a leader, especially as a high geared, we call them high D or A or alpha type of leaders. That's part of the gifting, and that's part of the energy that's required to get something started. But on the other hand, it definitely makes people start naming it after you, or always, it's like probably you feel like you can't just go to a group meeting, because what happens is everybody starts looking to you when they answer questions or they start sharing. And I've experienced that, as a when I was a church planter and a lead pastor, I would just try to slide into like a home group just to be a part. But people would start telling their story and they'd look at me even
Right.
while they're telling their story. That type of
Oh, yeah.
energy. Yeah, it's really hard. So you have to be very intentional as a leader in the language that you seed into the culture. And this is one of the things, this is one of the reasons, and I know that guys have gotten ticked off at me, and just like you can almost see them rolling their eyes when I bring up titles. And but this is part of culture creating. But I'm not the one that, it's like Billy Joel said, I didn't light the fire. I didn't start the fire. Jesus is the one that brought up titles in Matthew 23. And the reason he is because there's a power differential every time you use a rank-based title. And when someone gets called senior or someone gets called leader, or these things, it immediately raises one above the other. And you can't raise one person up without pushing another person down. And so Jesus told all these parables about equality. It didn't mean that everybody had the same power, but it meant everybody had the same status.
So in
And
Matthew 23, he's basically going, yeah, basically don't be called rabbi, correct?
don't be called rabbi, don't be called father, and don't be called teacher, don't be called leader.
And if
Uh,
the smart person goes, well, then what do we call ourselves? Then we go back to body language. We call ourselves brothers and sisters, right?
that's that sibling language that is throughout Acts and throughout the New Testament. Absolutely, it's that body family language. And Jesus says, because you have one Father, which this kicks back over into the whole king thing when Israel demanded to have a king, and when the Lord finally capitulated, he told Samuel, okay, when you go ahead and give them what they want, but tell them that what these kings are going to do, and they're going to be their hearts are going to be raised above their brothers. and that's what happens. And so that's why language is important, and that's why one of the things I always tell guys, especially if they're starting off from the beginning, do not use rank-based titles. Get more creative than that.
Okay, let me throw this at you. Every once in a while, I run into a what I would feel is like an arrogant pastoral position, but very rarely. All these years of walking with pastors, I've hardly ever run into like an arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
But there are good-hearted leaders that just go, look,
Absolutely.
I want to faithfully lead, and they would view it as their flock. And I'm the best up front, so I'm just going to do the upfront thing and kind of make it easy on everybody else. And yeah, everybody calls me the pastor, but I'm not going to overthink that. So, what do you say to the leaders? You just go, look, I know my heart. I know it's good. I know it's not about myself. What are your warnings or admonitions to still try to move away from that?
Well, I think I think that once again language, and I know it seems like I'm beating a dead drum, but think through the language. So and even the training and how you train people early on. Really let people know that there's no bosses and employees here. We are co-workers. We're co-laborers. We're fellow workers. Which once again, this is New Testament language. This is this in which those terms are used dozens and dozens of times throughout the New Testament. And it's interesting because in the Greek, co-labor, co-worker, it's a Greek word synergasio, which is, what word do we get from that? Synergy.
Yeah.
And so it's that synergy of everybody being in a circle, not being in a pyramid. So everybody gets to throw in. So I don't think that you can overemphasize it enough. It's because it's that strong. It has that much gravitational pull in pulling back everybody. That's why when we just say everything rises or falls on leadership, I think it's a dangerous, unhelpful statement, because everybody assumes what that leadership is.
So
It's
even if
the
your heart
leadership.
is pure, you're still in a structure that can't.
You're really fighting it. You're really fighting it. And I agree with you, Hugh. I think, 98, 99% of the pastors I've been around and met are good-hearted men and women. They don't want to be dictatorial. They don't want to build their own kingdom. Now, you've got that 2% that are narcissists off the chart, and they very much do want to build their kingdom. But even for the ones that don't, the heavy hierarchy, because of the system, is in play. And so but this is what Jesus did. I mean, Jesus was constantly throwing in paradoxical, uh, parables and stories that flip the script. Yeah, that flip the script, because so he didn't come to fix the system. He came to replace the system.
Yeah. Okay. So quick, couple more minutes on energy before we jump into system, because that's really important with this conversation. But just let's talk more about this gravitas factor and specifically how it applies. I know you're an APEST guy, so we all pretty much, correct me if I'm wrong, Lance, but we all pretty much kind of fall in this line of how important the gifts are to be functioning in unison within the faith
100%.
movement.
100%.
And do we all kind of agree that there's a fairly significant foundational element to the apostolic and prophetic
For sure.
within the, let's say but the planting of a community, like the establishing.
It's foundational. Absolutely.
Foundational. In my experience, rarely do I sit with or work with or talk with a community where there's not one or two that a lot of that energy and that what's like the gaze. You mentioned the small group that you're in. You come in and you sit down in a home group and you just want to be present, but somehow, some way, all the eyes just start going to Lance. My guess is you didn't overtly want that. You weren't going, all right, I'm going to come in and I want everyone to look to me.
Wanted the opposite. Just
Wanted the
wanted to
opposite.
be
Sure.
among.
We all
Right.
agree that it can feel good. It can feel
Sure.
like make us feel needed, important. But there is something inside of all three of us where we're like, no, we don't want to be the Atlas.
Right.
We want to, okay. But so the rub is, but it happens and it's real. And that's who you are. That's your DNA. You've probably been that way since you were young. It was probably that way for you as early as, 12, 13 years old.
You know what? Some of the studies, in fact, what you say right there, Taylor, is that there are studies that basically say, and this is a total generality, but the bottom line is, you can, for most people, can look at who they were in fourth grade.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
And that's who they are.
Yeah.
So, like I remember, I was thinking about the other day, I remember in fourth grade, a few minutes before recess, every time I would be, depending on the time of the year, I'd either be writing up the roster for the football team or the baseball team that I was going to organize when we got after recess.
Yeah.
And so as soon as we get out there, I mean, it's like just everybody kind of circle around me. I say, okay, you're on second base, you're on first base, here we go. Okay, line up. Or the football, to play football. Some of those things are clues as far as to who you are and what you're going to be. But you're right.
Yep.
From 10 to 12 years old.
And even my wife and I were talking yesterday about wartime mentality and how this is rarely an issue in a wartime context.
'Cause
Nobody's going.
You're desperate for somebody to step up,
Right.
And
Yeah.
tell us what we're doing, for sure.
Yeah.
So you see where I'm going with this. My fear is, and it's an evolved fear. It's as we've navigated this within my journey for 15 years, I see pleas that we make with people, that you make with people, that other writers and thinkers make with people, confuse calling, confuse people's minds in their idea of calling and who they're made. Fourth grade, with they begin to walk in like a shame of who they are.
Right.
I don't want this, so I'm going to be somebody different.
Mm-hmm.
Which we all know actually can't happen. You can develop an identity crisis and try to pretend like you're not this quote,
Right.
what we refer to as leader. And I pose that question to you in this conversation too. Like, is that even what the scriptures mean when it says leader? Because it seems like culture's definition of leader and Jesus's definition of leader are different.
Absolutely. The word leader in the New Testament, the very few times it is used, by the way, like 2 or 3, it literally means to render aid. Okay, now that's not the way we look at leadership today.
Right.
But that syncs up with Ephesians 4 after it talks about the APES, apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, and teacher. It says they are there to equip, right, the saints for the work of service. They're there to render aid, to resource, to be a resourcer. So most leaders today, most senior leaders, when they wake up in the morning, the first thing that they're thinking about, or when they get to the office with the staff or whatever, they're thinking about how they're going to manage that staff.
Manage.
Management. And so they're going to be thinking about how they get that staff to do what they want done. They're not thinking, okay, I wonder what Dave needs from me today.
So, okay.
I wonder what Becky needs from me today.
So it really seems like it's more of just a misunderstanding, which we talk about a lot in the book of the virtues of Babylon and the virtues of kingdom. It's not that you're not a leader. You're a gifted leader, and you were kind of designed that way in the womb. But when you began to develop those, Babylon sunk its teeth into you. Empire sunk its teeth into you and told you that a leader is a ruler.
Right.
But if I was to describe leadership, and I mean by in terms of calling, not in terms of virtue, I would say that the pinnacle of leadership is when you give your life to elevate others, to find who they are, their potential, their calling, their worth, and you equip and elevate that. And that's kind of when you've reached the so-called pinnacle of leadership. What do
Right.
you think about that?
No, I totally agree, Taylor. I think it's a good way to put it. And if you look at Jesus as a leader, let's just look at him with the 12. He found these guys, they were off doing their thing. They're doing what they felt like they were to be. And he starts calling them to follow him. But then what did he do? He equipped them. He taught them the kingdom. He taught them the practices of the kingdom. And then he sent them out. And look what they did. They changed the world. But it was because he helped them discover their unique calling and their unique gifting in each one of them according to their own personalities.
But
And
it
he
doesn't
equipped them.
seem like he had one skilled leader with him early on.
Not the one. No, and that's the thing. I mean, they were just blue collar dudes, right? And it's because if we define leadership in the way that the world defines leadership, yeah, you'd look and say, that's really not leadership. But in the kingdom, here's the deal: leadership is not an action. Leadership is an after fruit. Okay, it's a produce. And so you look at the overall accumulation of what's happening in the community and you say that's leadership, but it's not attuned to one individual. Okay, it's what happens within the community. Let me put it another way. When one of these guys falls, has a big crisis, a big, pastor falls through, some immorality or whatever, or it may be, and more these years now, you're seeing guys get fired for abuse of their, not sexual abuse, but just bullying and, all that kind of stuff. So what people will say in that community, they'll go, well, we need new leadership. But they don't mean we need new leadership. They mean we need a new guy.
Mm-hmm.
We need a new leader. If they were saying we need new leadership, they would be looking systemically.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm saying is leadership.
That's great.
Is systemic. Okay, it's a fruit. It's an after fruit of what the community does together.
So you could say a primary in any context, especially in like a kingdom ecosystem, Brave City type of context,
Mm-hmm.
church plant, whatever it is, the primary, I guess, focus of leadership should be to create a kingdom culture, right? Kingdom culture of empowerment. Like I think
100%.
you got Taylor and I just here in our small, I guess, very small community here in Alton. Neither of us have a title. Neither of us have like salary. So we don't take any money. We don't take a title.
Sure like some salary
I
though.
would like some salary.
I know. We've been wanting
And we
that
don't
for
really
20
have
years.
a position, like a designated role. But we still sort of emerge as like the big brothers of the community.
Sure.
Type of thing. And I'm hoping, I believe that that's still okay because we've kind of set the culture. And I don't think there's anything you can do to get away from being a culture setter, whether you set it poorly or you set it well,
Mm-hmm.
type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you clearly don't need any of those. You don't need position, title, or money to be a significant apostolic prophetic leader of some community. So
you guys have proved that there, and
yeah, we're broke.
that's the oh man, we've been trying to figure this out for 20
Hey,
years.
let me turn to this is
that's the next the money conversation is next, Lance.
I want to turn to
I'm the wrong guy.
Yeah, Lance, he's broke too.
Yeah, I ain't got
What happens when
nothing.
you write a book?
See, I mean, look, that's all the tobacco I got left for the day, so I'm running out. I'm broke.
Let's turn it to some practical because again, most of the leaders we're around, especially in the Brave City context, when I'm just thinking through the leaders that we run into, male and female, and they're all just like overtly humble leaders. But most of us are dealing with millennials who don't, at least from what I can tell, they don't want to lead. and they have a fear of anybody that is going to lead. But then there's also the issue of, when nobody wants to step up, you get a frustration that you just can't get movement in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And there's times I've as opposed to an unhealthy leader that just wants his staff to get it done for his vision, think about it in a positive way. How do we motivate, or even put our gifting on the back burner so that these younger leaders that don't want to lead will actually step up and take their gifted position.
Well, that's actually what I mean, Lance, when I say there's a kind of effect that's happening that I wonder if any of us wanted. I didn't want. I don't think any of us wanted, and it's in the vein of the failure of nerve idea.
Mm-hmm.
Where when we poo-poo on leadership so much, which needs to be, we then create a shame and a fear, a failure of nerve to actually lead when you have that capability. And one other thing I've seen, and I know has been present in my own life, I bet you guys have stories as well, that when you are a natural leader, you're thrusted into leadership in every single epic or season of your life. And the reality is when you're very young, that's a super dangerous move for people to make, to push you into these leadership positions, whether it's leaders longer in the story than you or people that are younger than you. And then you have such a hard time navigating the tension of empire and kingdom, like especially with this exposure to social media and everything going on around us now, is leadership. Look at this influencer. Look at what this person's doing. Look at this next book. It's virtually impossible as a young man to know how to navigate, or young woman to know how to I think women do it a little better, but to know how to navigate all of that tension of this is what a successful leader is. I'll give one quick example, but I remember 2 or 3 years into our Birmingham story being real big, Lance, on the positionless idea. And I sat with a very important friend of mine who just thought it was nonsense for me to not call myself the executive director, to the point where I left going, I feel like a fool. So I came back and we had a little board time and I was like, I'll be the executive director. I remember this point in my life. I was probably 31 years old at the time, 32 years old, maybe. And I didn't know how to navigate, like, who's the leader and who does this. And I very much admit, that knowing how to navigate that without elders in my life was extremely difficult.
Yeah.
So I have so much mercy on so many leaders that are trying to figure out, older ones that have kind of screwed up or made mistakes that are trying to figure out what's their place now, younger ones that are afraid to lead because of this failure of nerve epidemic. So what do you see all
Well,
that?
I look, I think where you hit the nail on the head there, Taylor, is the elder thing. And
I do too, by the way. I
yeah,
agree.
I think we totally, for the most part, speaking in generalities, my gosh, that's what we're doing here.
We
in
have
these
to.
conversation. We're speaking in generalities. So no comments down below or anything like, we're generally speaking, right? But for the most part, we have really gotten eldership wrong. And it's caused two things. It's caused a misappropriation or a misuse of elders, and then it's caused, and I think greater, a non-use of true elders in the midst. And so when you and I were young, when you were young, I know me, when I went out to the northwest suburbs of St. Louis and planted, how old was I? I was just turned 30 years old. 30, okay?
Yep.
At that point, seriously, when my hormones hadn't kicked in right yet, my testosterone or something, I didn't even shave then. I mean, I was that young, but I was the senior leader. I
Yeah.
was the head elder. Really?
Primarily because of gravitas, right?
Because of gravitas, all that gifting, all
Yeah.
that, absolutely, and all that energy that a 30-year-old has,
And
right?
back in those
Okay.
days, you were told to make sure you got your elder structure nailed in
Right.
even
And
before
who
you
were
start the
those
plant.
guys?
Like, yeah,
And who were those guys? I had to find the best businessmen we had.
Right.
You know,
yeah,
in fact, we did. We had a real estate guy that was really successful. We had a banker, a couple other people. Um, then when you look at really the requirements for an elder in the script, they met, they'd hit on like 20% of it. But the other thing is when you look at eldership in the New Testament, you see that it's not business people that run the business of the church. Okay. No, every time that they're mentioned, it says the elders among you,
Yeah.
which literally means shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
So I think elders are completely underutilized. If we would have been smart, and I'm able to look back on it, within a year, we had 2 or 3 older couples in our church that had been into multiple rodeos. Okay, they had been around the church, Big C Church, for so long, had experience, and basically we just benched them. That it was like, just tithe, be sweet, be a greeter, and
be sweet.
and the rest of us, we got this thing. Us young ones, we've been to the church camp, to the boot camps. We've been through all this. We're the ones that got this thing. And man, it would have saved us several crises early on if I would have just been having coffee 2 or 3 times a week with those older guys and let them pour it into me
Yeah.
and pour it into the rest of us.
Yeah.
And in fact, in Atlas, I do a chapter on elders and the wise ones that are among us. So we need to activate those. Now, what that does is then that helps that young leader use all that juice that
Yeah.
he or her has, that God's
Right.
given them, to
Right.
run with it, while the old guy sits on the porch with a cup of coffee and
Yes.
says, "Go get them."
Yeah.
And when you get your butt in a crack, come back. I'll be on the porch. Come sit back down, and we'll have a talk.
Yeah,
That's a segment right there.
yeah.
That's perfect, man. So system or foundation, or what were you thinking with that?
Well, I mean, to me, it plays into what we were saying in the Brave Cities is everything. You have to view everything related to the ecclesial structures as a family. If you view it outside
Yes.
of a family, it doesn't make sense anymore. But if the elders are truly the moms and dads, grandpas and grandparents, um, then I go that in one way, that's the easiest way to get started. But for a lot of the brand new networks that we see, there's not a lot of older folks in there. So I think
Right.
that's something for the planters, the ecosystem builders to think about. I always feel like the empty nesters are really they should be the engine of every movement.
Mm.
Because they got the stability, they got the houses, they
They
still
got the
remember how to
time.
Can we
they
agree
know how
though?
to cook.
Yeah.
Can we agree though that it's a two-part problem with the elders and with the younger people?
For sure, let's put most of the problem on the younger people too, so we'll feel better.
Right, but I'm saying just Babylon is Babylon. And there's a story of you've made it now, you've finished your time,
Yeah.
relax, go to the lake and enjoy your life and play golf,
Yeah.
where we would say, no, we need you now more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is but most people that are in that season in their life, the older people, they do think it's over for them,
Yeah.
Well,
because
in a
that's the
classic
way the
Sunday
system's been.
centric structure, it is.
Yeah,
It
If
kind of
church
is.
is go to church, then yeah, you got nothing to do. But
yeah.
if it's literally building a kingdom ecosystem, then you never get out of position.
No, it's in fact your energy and your wisdom is needed more than ever. And that's why we have such a therapeutic culture now. And so you've got young, because right now the average family lives 200 miles away from the grandparents. So think about it, Hugh.
I was just about to bring this up. Yeah.
Yeah. So Hugh, I mean, like your your kids, your daughters and son-in-laws live right there. There's no way to calculate the relief that you and Cheryl give to them. And there's even been major crisis that you guys have gone through, and one of your daughters and son-in-law went through a couple years ago. Now imagine if they all lived 200 miles away from you.
Yeah.
There's no wonder we're so therapeutic and medicated as a culture today.
Yeah.
So that's just from the
Anxiety,
that's just from
stress. Yeah.
family standpoint. But the thing is once you get a church plant going and growing, if we were to acknowledge the older ones among us, even if a young family does live, across the country from the grandparents, they've got like these adoptive grandparents as elders right there in their midst, but we're not using them.
Yeah, I even think like and people will pick this up as they read Brave Cities. We are really angling hard towards more impoverished areas, right? Impoverished cities.
Yeah.
And you have such a dilemma with fatherless families. Like I just go, it's gonna get easier and easier if you are an elder to see the fruit of ministry, because I feel like the culture is absolutely desperate for some stability on the street corner, like just anywhere, just having somebody
Yeah.
walking down the street consistently. So I don't think we could talk about true eldership more than we are now. Maybe we just can't talk about it enough.
Yeah.
But
I
for
agree.
sure, if you're only viewing church as that Sunday thing,
Yeah.
I don't think any of this makes any sense. Like,
Lance, do you think that would are you, you know, in the school of thought, like you live there, you're there, no question now, that if you're going to start a Sunday centric kind of Western evangelical model church, what we're talking about is virtually impossible? Does the system matter that much, or is there a hybrid available?
and more, and again, add to that, can you remove the consumerism without changing the system?
Yeah, it's a chicken and an egg type of deal, right? Because one's feeding the other and they're both dependent upon one another. So it's like, who's to blame for this thing right now? Is it the consumer Christian, or is it the professional minister that is a vendor of religious goods and services, and that's what they do? So it's like it's a codependent relationship. So I think, going to what you're asking, Taylor, I think it's pretty hard. I don't know why, if you were wanting to create a Sunday centric entity, I don't even know why you would be interested in this stuff. Why would you give your energy to all this that we're talking about here when you're having to give so much energy to smoke machines and theatrics and all that? And I know I'm sounding like a jerk there, but
Well, and yeah,
I don't
so
think you guys want to cut through that stuff. And
well,
look,
you're mostly right. You don't sound like a jerk. You're mostly right. I think we've all three seen the pure pursuit. Because look, full disclosure, I am the guy that thinks that it's impossible. But I think that it's impossible in the same sense that I think that getting a Christian president in the White House is a silly notion to fixing empire. You see what I'm saying?
mm-hmm.
Like when we talk about building better cities, we're saying we can't go the way of Babylon anymore. And when Babylon synchronized itself with ecclesia, which I think we all feel like was kind of in that Constantinian time period, there's no going back. It's not like, well, let's try it. Let's keep trying it and see if we can make it work. And now here we are,
Back again.
quite
Yeah.
a few years beyond that, still trying. So I'm just kind of putting my cards on the table and saying, yeah, I don't really think the hybrid works. only because, not because hearts aren't pure and desires aren't pure, but because it's been tried for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, apart from the smoke machines, I mean, you got all kind of styles. You got guys that just want to have church with a cardboard box and some fishing line, playing guitar on that in a tent. You got people who want to have church with nothing but liturgy and reverence. You got people
Right.
who want to have Sunday centric church with they'll call it, we have a church near here, it's called the house church, but it's in a building and it's a Sunday centric. So yes, all of those things combined, for me, it's not even about the style, the
Yeah.
leather pants wearing, slick hair guy, or the Shane Claiborne-ish cardboard guy. It's the system.
Yeah, it is. It's not, I always say it's not about the box. It's about what you have in the box. So it doesn't matter. I would totally agree. But if you're trying, if most of your energy is put into pulling off a great weekend service,
That's right.
I think that's what we agree on.
Yeah.
And this stuff can happen in hierarchy. One of the things is, I've even been on a lot of podcasts lately, on this new book, and there's been a couple they'll go that I'll see, then they even put the descriptors, and I didn't even use the word mega church in the whole conversation, but then in the descriptor of the talk they'll go, this is why mega churches are messed up, or this, this is not an attack on mega churches.
Nope.
Because the
same thing.
It's what's going, because look, we've all known guys that have a church of 40 that are just complete out of their mind dictators. That's their little fiefdom.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter. And then we've all known also guys that do, like I think of a couple of guys, Hugh, like I think of Dan Sutherland, I think of Dave Ferguson, guys that have run huge churches that are servant guys, man, kingdom guys, lowly, humble guys. So that's not the issue when it comes to the system.
We're going to have to see. This is incredible content, but we now have a baby screaming back here. I don't know if you can hear it, but
I don't.
We'll see how the mics pick it up. But what else are you thinking for today?
All I'm thinking about is that baby screaming.
I can't even hear the baby. Seriously, I don't
that
hear
means our setup is world class.
So. Yeah, you guys have a high. Now, I tell you, one of the things that's hit me as we've been talking is I have figured out, I was like, where have I seen this set before? I finally figured it out. Where? I know. Wayne's World, man.
Yeah, that's what we modeled it after.
Yeah,
that's your model, right?
I take that as a high compliment.
No, it's great.
Well, I mean, there's so much to talk. Again, the difficulty is for me right now is thinking about the younger generation of gifted leaders and saying, we want you to lead. We want you to be who you are. We want you to have the energy and the passion and the gravitas.
Right.
But we want to help you lay a foundation that releases everyone, that frees everyone to be who they can be. And again, and lastly, the pinnacle of leadership that we're trying to guide you to is where you spend your life elevating others.
I like that, among the people too. You're just you're
one
of the community.
Yeah. Well, see, there's tons of hints for this in the epistles. In fact, I think that I think that we've really lost a lot of the juice, for instance, in Romans 12, because most of the time when people think of Romans 12, they think of, those first, 2 or 3 verses, I appeal to you by the mercies of God, be not conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? And offer your life as a living sacrifice. And we think, okay, that's a great verse to go on the refrigerator and remind me not to be worldly. But when you look at the rest of that chapter, it really is about leadership in the church, because he starts getting into giftings. And so he mentions many of the giftings, but one of the first things he says is, don't let any, in verse 3, in fact, he says, I appeal to you by the mercies of God. Don't let anyone think of themselves more highly than they ought to think, but think soberly. So, but then he goes into all these different giftings and he talks about the measure of faith. And so, the fact of the matter is that there are, like the three of us sitting right here today, all three of us, Taylor, Hugh, myself. So there are some giftings that we have that are very similar. I mean, that they're the same gift. Then each one of us has a gift or two that's very different than the other two guys have. So on that same gift, most likely one of us is going to have a greater measure of faith in that. So like I look at Hugh, and so with that apostolic entrepreneurial gift, I can barely see his taillights as far as the gift, the faith portion that the Lord has apportioned to him.
Yeah.
So the onus on Hugh is, if I'm in y'all's community and he's cultivating me or others, is for him to constantly stay sober in that measure, right? And then look to the others and say, okay, what's my role? My role is to be an equipper. My role is to raise up the others that have a similar gifting, to suss them out, to find them, and then to say, okay, those are the ones I'm particularly going to lean into. And then Taylor, you're going to look into your prophetic gift, and you're going to look for the young prophets, and you're going to say, I'm going to focus on resourcing and promoting those guys and forming them, giving aid to them. That's what leadership is.
Yeah,
That's great.
it is great. I think like so much that we talk about in our Brave Cities conversations, when I hear you say everything that you just said, I know it's right. It's so close to right, it might be exactly right. But I can't help but go, and we might never see it.
Or we'll just always struggle with it for sure.
At least
Yeah.
we'll struggle with it.
Well,
I
and
think
every single
I think we
person that
will
comes-
always struggle with
every
it.
person that comes into our environments, they have preconceived expectations on what they want
And
somebody to
insecurities.
Well, guys, think about it. 3 years Jesus is with the 12, pouring into them. 3 years, man. They're with him. They're seeing everything. We would give our right and left arm to be those guys for 3 years. And even at that point, I mean, he's talking kingdom. At that point, those guys are like, hey, I know you're going to do that cross thing, and that's going to be a tough day for you, Jesus. But hey, when you get your kingdom going, can I be, Secretary of State?
Can we
be
rule with you? Yeah.
Right? Can we rule? Saying Jesus has to. Can you imagine him just shaking his head and sitting them down when he does say, "Hey, it's not going to be that way."
Yeah.
So I do think we will always struggle with this stuff.
I think we got to continue this.
We have to go part 2.
There's more to be said here, and I assume that you have more to say. But this is a good start. Maybe we can listen back and make some notes and go, hey, let's dig deeper, because I also want to talk about so here's maybe a trailer for the next conversation, Lance. I want to talk about, like, why do we elevate certain gifts, and how do we war against, because Corinthians, isn't it Corinthians that says you have an eye, you have a hand, you have different parts of the body, and all serve a purpose.
Right.
And it does seem like the way of empire, the way of Babylon, is to elevate the eye or the mouth.
Absolutely.
Right? Kind of that mindset or that concept. Whereas within a kingdom ecosystem, everyone sees every unique gift as valuable. Which this is my point. In Jim Crow America, when you would elevate the minority to equal status, the majority felt like they were being dehumanized. Does that make sense? In James's kind of take on the party when the poor man comes and he says, give the poor man a seat at the table, it in a sense parabolically made the rich man feel like he was seen as less than.
Right.
And so what I'm saying is because the mouth or the eye, the natural leader, we could even probably say the apostolic prophetic within a kingdom ecosystem has for so long been elevated. When we try to bring others to an equal playing field with them of recognition and need, it confuses everything.
Mhm.
Everybody's like, wait, what's going on? Y'all are the leaders. It both confuses the other gifts, but it also can make the natural leaders or the apostolic, whatever, feel like they're made less than. So I really want to talk about, like, what are the practical ways that we can start to embody every gifting, every
Yeah.
calling, every leadership output has a real place in a kingdom ecosystem.
Yeah, and the getting on the solution side is what we have to do. It's like everybody can point out symptoms. And
Theorize.
that's what, and that's what so many of the podcasts over the last 3 or 4 years have done, and about the abuse and everything. It's like, okay, hey, we got to get on the solution side. And you're not going to create a decentralized leadership in your organization in a vacuum of hierarchy. You can't just wipe out the hierarchy and think, okay, it's all going to be good. No, then you get anarchy.
Yeah.
You get crazy town then.
Well, and you get what I'm talking about, this failure of nerve. Like, everybody's saying, I'm never,
Right.
don't put me in any position of leadership because
Right.
I'm terrified that I'm going to mess up.
Right. And you can create a culture like what the Aussies call the tall poppy syndrome, right? And then if anybody does show some leadership, they get slapped down by everybody. Well, who do you think you are? So it's why it's a total reorienting and redefining of what leadership is. But that's the kingdom aspect of it. That's why it's all paradoxical and just mind blowing, the things that Jesus says, because they're antithetical to everything we've seen in Babylon and Egypt and in the Gentiles.
Yep.
Well, my friend, thank you.
No, it's always good to be with you guys, an honor to be with you guys. And seriously, is this going to be called the Brave Cities podcast or what? What are you going to call us?
We call them
Called the Gray Pages.
Gray Pages.
The Great Pages. Okay.
Pages.
But seriously, in fact, I was just last weekend with Alan Hirsch and Rob Wagner. We were in Kansas City, and we were talking about Brave Cities, excited for it to come out. And of course, we'd already read the manuscript, and just seriously, guys, it's outstanding, and it's a gift to the body. So anybody that's listening to this, hopefully they've already read it. If not, get it for your team. I'll definitely be talking it up because it's another really great tool in our toolbox.
Thanks, dude.
To move forward. So it's fantastic. You guys did a great job with it.
Thank you as well, my friend. Thanks for continuing to talk about very important stuff. So
appreciate you guys.
See you soon, man.